I've got all this time on my hands and no fights to overly analyze, so let's talk about some upcoming fights I'm looking forward to. Everybody, if you're new to the channel, I'm a YouTube nobody and I've got a couple questions for you. Question number 1, what do you get when you take a much anticipated rematch of a successful fight and schedule it on the same night as the opening night of Avengers Endgame? That's right, divided fans. Question 2, what happens when you take your biggest star and schedule his next fight on the same night as your rival promotion's hyped up event? That's right, divided fan. Canelo vs Kovalev. Have you not heard? DAZN and Golden Boy Promotions made the genius marketing decision to announce Canelo Alvarez's next fight to be on the same night as UFC 244 Jorge Masvidal vs Nate Diaz on November 2nd. The true genius of this announcement was that they made it right after the UFC already announced their event and already begun promoting it and generating hype. No better way to cater to your fans than making them choose, am I right? All joking aside, despite the fact that I cover boxing on this channel almost exclusively, I'm also a huge UFC MMA fan, and I've got to say the anticipation I have for Masvidal vs Diaz is actually higher than my anticipation for Canelo vs Kovalev, and I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. Makes you wonder why they didn't just schedule it for the weekend after. Regardless, I'm still going to watch Canelo vs Crusher, so I'm going to give you some thoughts on it now that it's official. Now, you may recall, if you're one of those poor souls who actually watches my cheap content, that I previously predicted Sergey Kovalev to beat Canelo Alvarez, but some of you guys gave me some comments that tempt me to cuck myself and change my pick. You see, my brain tells me Kovalev will be too good on the outside and use his length and skill to outbox Canelo with the jab and straight right. After all, he was able to outbox the likes of Bernard Hopkins and Andre Ward and everyone else he fights with the jab and straight right. But then I remember he outboxes everybody with just the jab and straight right because it's all he can do. So my gut tells me and you guys that Canelo will be able to get in on Kovalev and chop his body down with hooks. After all, Kovalev completely lacks a hook, an inside game, and is notoriously weak down to the body. Canelo is a devastating body puncher and is probably a better overall boxer than Kovalev. Also, as much as I hate to say it, if this fight is in any way close after the final bell, then we already know who's going to win. Now, I'm not going to be a complete bitch and change my pick, but I also keep having flashbacks to another time when a star boxer moved up 2 weight divisions from their natural weight class and beat the biggest name champion coming off of a tough fight. I also am reminded of a time before that.
Beautiful counter shot like that. Yeah, here comes it. And he can switch because he's a natural south. Oh, nice movement from Cotto to avoid those shots.
Anyways, that's my thoughts on Canelo vs Kovalev. You can watch it on November 2nd if you're a bitch and subscribe to DAZN, or you could pirate it like a normal human being. The next fight I'm looking forward to is the aforementioned UFC 244, otherwise known under its original title Straight Outta Compton 2, The Return of Scarface. Jorge Masvidal vs Nate Diaz on November 2nd for the supposed baddest motherfucker in the game is a fight most fight fans are pretty hyped for. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an MMA expert or anything, I've only done boxing so far, but I've watched enough MMA to say this is probably a tough fight to win for Nate Diaz. You can watch the fight on pay-per-view if you're a bitch and subscribe to ESPN Plus, or you could pirate it like a normal human being. Errol Spence vs Sean Porter is the closest upcoming fight from now I'm going to be talking about, and probably the next fight I'll make a film study on. Now, Errol Spence is now a big favorite in this fight, and not without reason. I'm picking him to win this fight as well. However, I don't think this is going to be as easy as everyone is saying it's going to be. Yes, Spence outclasses Porter in almost every facet skill-wise, but I'm also inclined to believe that this is a bad stylistic matchup for Spence. Now let me explain. You see, Spence seems to love fighting guys that try to box with him. Spence will keep a constant heavy jab on you throughout the fight, which is quite rare for a southpaw. He uses that jab to keep his opponents honest, and that's when he begins to pick his opponents apart. From there, he can apply his pressure and tactically mow people down. Now, Spence does have an excellent inside game, but it really only shines when he's the one initiating the pressure. You see, when his opponents are the ones initiating the pressure on him, it's a completely different story. Kell Brook had a lot of success against Spence when he took the fight to him and kept his punches compact. Shawn Porter is known for being a pressure fighter. Whether he comes out and fights that way September 28th remains to be seen, but if he does, he could make the fight much more competitive than I think a lot of people are expecting. Now, I do think Porter has good enough hand speed and stamina to give Spence some problems, but ultimately I see Spence using his skill to outbox Porter and even outfight him on the inside once he gets a feel for his timing and his habits. You can watch the fight on September 28th if you buy the bitch-ass Fox pay-per-view, or you could pirate it like a normal person. Okay, well that's all the time I've got for now. That's all the fights I'm looking forward to this fall, and I know what you're thinking. You're wondering, what about Ruiz versus Joshua 2? Well, that's in the winter, so we'll talk about that one later. I know this kind of video is not what I typically do. I know this is going to get virtually no views and was probably a huge waste of time for me to make. But hey, I had time to make a video, but had no fights to do a film study on, so here we are. We cover everything fighting here, and this is the sweet science. And you know what else is science? Did you know that it's scientifically proven that if you subscribe to my channel, then you're not a punk-ass bitch? I'm sorry, that was mean. If you like the video, there's a button for that. If you want to see more from me, then there's a button for that as well. I'll see you all real soon. Thank you all for watching.
Opportunity comes once in a lifetime. You better lose yourself in your